And I've gone down to a number 2 round brush again, and I'm going to put in some little touches here. These bluey green cypress trees. It's a mixture of ultramarine and sap green and titanium white, and we're just putting in a few little touches in the distant landscape in order to give an impression of hedgerows, and there are some little hedges, but mainly these tall vertical cypress trees are very indicative of this kind of landscape. And where there are some orange touches showing through as well, it just looks like warmth coming through from the soil, really. A little ridge here, the area where my buildings are, I'm going to re-establish because I'm going to redraw those in a minute. And when working with acrylics, you don't have to get in all of the detail right at the beginning, and there's no need to do detailed drawing. You can stop the painting and redraw at any time, and that's what I'm going to do a little bit later on. We've got a row of small bushes and trees coming down here. Again, I'm adding a little more sap green into this mix just in order to get the colour changing. And so as we're getting down here, it's getting darker. Allowing the brush to break up and become almost a dry brush technique, just to give this a more textural look. And that's going to go down into my poppies down here. This is where the area of poppies will be later on. A few of the cypress trees around this area and in the area where the buildings are, I'm going to now just put in some of the shrubby kind of trees here. And these vertical, strong verticals are quite important. It's a Tuscany kind of a look, really. The tall, thin, bluey green cypress shapes. We'll put a few in. We're going to paint the buildings in here later on. They'll come over the top of this if I want to put buildings in. This is an opaque method, and I'm using plenty of paint. The paint is not diluted. The paint is actually on my brush in fairly thick chunks, and therefore it's going to obliterate any colour that's underneath. So I can be quite relaxed about where the colours go, because I can always put more opaque colour on the top. My little pathway or track coming down here, we can put some darks in there. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll start thinking about re-establishing the shape of the buildings and blocking in some greens down here for the poppies. That'll be the next job when this is allowed to dry for another couple of minutes. So everything down here is dry now, and if it was oils I'd be waiting for about another 5 or 6 days, but acrylics have this advantage of drying quickly. I've mixed up a sap green and a burnt sienna. This is going to be where some of the poppies are growing up on this nice grassy bank, and I'm using a large synthetic bristle brush to put in a range of greens down here. This will carry the poppies a little bit later, and obviously a nice dark background colour will work well, and greens and reds are complementary colours. Before this dries, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to lift out some of the shapes, and also I'm going to scrape back with the handle of this big brush just to give an impression of stalks. So I'm actually putting the stalks and the leaves and an impression of bits and pieces for the poppies to be growing up through before I put the poppies in. And the first thing is I'm going to put some scrape marks in with the handle of the brush, just scraping back. Not too straight, otherwise it becomes a cliche. So basically, the poppies have to grow from somewhere, and they're quite tall flowers, and they grow on stalks. And so I'm implying some of that. That's it. And I'm using a little bit of damp kitchen roll, just lifting out areas where I want some of the nearer ones, because it's easier to put a bright red colour on an orangey background than it is on the green. And I'm just able now to lift out before this dries. It's got about 5 minutes before it's going to be too dry to do this. You need to have everything ready. You've got to have everything to hand, because leave it for a few minutes while you go and look for some kitchen roll, and when you come back it's too dry. I think that's going to be okay. Maybe a little bit more scraping back. Now I know where the poppies are going, I can scrape back a few additional little stalks. And I think now we can just sit back and wait for this to dry for another 5 minutes. So the area of the building is what I'm going to be working on now. And I'm referring to my sketch. It's quite nice to work from sketches. I know we all go off and go on holiday and promise ourselves we're going to do lots of paintings and drawings and things, but if you've got people with you, often the easiest option is to take a photograph. But little pen and ink sketches like this one, you can rattle them out in 10 minutes or so. So before the kids start saying, are you ready to go yet, Dad, or whatever, you can get a couple of sketches done. I quite like to do these, and anything that's not in the sketch, if you've got a photograph taken as well. But it's nice to work from a sketch, gives you a more intimate and more memorable image to work from. I'm using a mix of titanium white with a little bit of cadmium yellow just to define the shapes of some of these buildings, and the background colour, which was an orange put on the board, helps in this case because it's a kind of a sandstony colour, and it does have that warmth about it which will lend itself nicely to the colours found in these buildings. Just blocking in windows and doors and shadows and so on will come later on. So this is just about getting in the basics. I'm leaving gaps for windows where I can, but if I can't do that for any reason, then they'll come on top later on. I'm also making the ground level, the bit where the building touches the ground, a little bit uneven because these buildings aren't set on an absolutely level, solid footing. Therefore, it's best not to make them too regular. The building here disappearing behind these trees and reappearing, I can put in a little touch here and there just to show that there are some buildings going on behind. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on.